Althusser, uh, Althusser, Althusser was a French philosopher. We have actually gone through some ideas of Althusser in neo-Marxism. We have gone through interpellation as well. We are going to see the whole thing again. We are going to see the whole thing again. Why? We are going to see the whole thing in context of existentialism, in context of postmodernism, right? That is what the agenda of this lecture is. We have seen Althusser in the context of neo-Marxism, whereby what neo-Marxism wants to say that cultural factors are also as important as economic factor, right? We have seen and understood Althusser through that lens of neo-Marxism. In this lecture, we are going to see Althusser and his concept through the lens of existentialism, right? Okay. So Althusser. Who was Althusser? Althusser was a Frenchman, and recently we have studied another Frenchman, Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre, for him, existence is prior to essence, and Sartre talks about humanism. Humanism everywhere. So Sartre will limit his idea of Marxism to humanism, right? Sartre will limit his idea of Marxism to alienation, right? So what will happen when a philosopher will limit Marxism to humanism, Marxism to alienation? What happens is the change in the central idea of Marxism, which is economic base, right? So this this action of Sartre, this action of Sartre, which tried to limit Marxism to humanism or Marxism to alienation, had had a reaction from man of this lecture, Althusser. Althusser, right? Althusser. Althusser, in his book For Marx, gives reaction to whatever Sartre has tried to do. Sartre has tried to do. What Althusser does is this action of Sartre, whereby he limits Marxism to humanism, he limits Marxism to alienation. In reaction to this, what Althusser does is this: he gives the idea of structuralism, and he criticizes existentialism. He criticizes existentialism, right? He criticizes existentialism. So, how does he revives Marxism? How does he revives Marxism is by giving this idea of structuralism. By giving this idea of structuralism. What is structuralism? What is structuralism? What is structuralism? Structuralism is saying that there are two structures, superstructure and basic structure, and they affect each other. This is structuralism, right? And saying that between these two structures of basic structure and superstructure, choices of man are limited, right? For existentialist, what 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 do existentialists say? What do Sartre say? That your destiny is not predetermined. You are free to do whatever you want to do. Correct? You are free to do whatever you want to do. Althusser, on the other hand, says no. You are limited by the structures. You are not free to do whatever you want to do. You are limited by the structures. And for this limitation, he uses this word interpellation. You are interpellated by the structures. You are not born free. You are not born free. Neither you can become something. Neither you can rewrite your destiny because you are interpellated. What does interpellation mean? It means that structures constrain your choices, right? This idea of Althusser, idea of interpolation, basically is criticism of existentialism, whereby he says that you are limited by structures, you are interpolated by structures, right? Throughout postmodernism, we have seen that grand ideas, grand narratives, meta narratives limit your thinking. This is exactly what interpolation means. Interpolation means that structures constrain your choices, right? For Lyotard, narratives, meta narratives limit your choices. For Foucault, what limits your choices? For Foucault, discourses limit your choices. And for Althusser, structure constrain your choices, right? So you don't have opportunity to write your destiny. You are limited by the structures, right? You are limited by the structures. This is what Althusser is trying to say, right? You are limited by the structures. Idea very much similar to hegemony, whereby Gramsci says that you are limited by the ideas which has been fed to you by civil society, by dominant class, right? Similar words, very much similar words. Mm, words like uh, word like disciplinary power, word like meta narratives, all these words have similar connotations, similar meanings. Interpolation is very similar word to that. That constraining part is there, right? Throughout postmodernism, you will see by one or other thing, you are limited. Your choices are limited, which existentialism try to solve by saying you can be whatever you want to do. Existence is prior to essence. Interpolation is against that, whereby Althusser says that you cannot break your chains, you cannot write your destiny because structures limit your choices. Because structure limits your choices. Right now, interpolation. right? Now interpolation. We are going to understand interpolation in more detail, right? We are going to understand two instruments for interpolation. For Gramsci, if you remember well, what do you think is an instrument of hegemony? Civil society, right? In the same way, instrument of interpolation, instrument of constraining choices and making common sense, and ideas making common sense. Two instrument of interpolation for Althusser. First instrument is state. Second instrument is ideology, right? First instrument is state, second instrument is ideology. We are going to see both in detail one by one. So first, Althusser's view on state and Althusser's view on state as instrument of interpolation, right? State as instrument of interpolation. State as instrument of interpolation, whereby whereby Althusser takes structuralist view of state, structuralist view of state, and he calls state to be relatively autonomous. He calls state to be relatively autonomous. What does relative autonomy means? Relative autonomy means that state is not instrument of capitalist class, but it has some power of itself. State, like basic structure influence superstructure, superstructure influence basic structure. In the same way, capitalist class influence state and state influence capitalist class as well. This is relative autonomy, right? Both the structure have same power, some influence on each other. This is relative autonomy, right? Althusser takes structuralist view of state, and Althusser take relatively autonomous view of state, right? He analyzes state in short term and in long term. In short term, for Althusser, state have relative autonomy. State maintain relative autonomy. And in long term, for Althusser, state is an instrument, right? What does it mean? It means one thing, right? In normal times, in normal times, state will be pro-poor. If normal times are there, in normal times, state is pro-poor. And in crisis, state will be pro-capitalist, right? In crisis, state will be pro-capitalist. I will give you example of American capitalism or American state, right? In normal times, whenever there was a boom phase in America, like in rule of Obama, like in rule of Bush, state tried to give a lot of amenities to its citizens. Like Obama started Obamacare, right? Then Bush had a very progressive view on a lot of things. even though he was a Republican, he had a progressive view on a lot of things. They tried to do some social justice. Now in crisis time, whenever now the international relations scholars are saying that American hegemony or American state is in decline. What you see in rule of Biden, in rule of Donald Trump, you see a lot of favors to capitalists, right? And this is true across across countries, across time and across space, right? Right? I will give you one more example of Bangladesh, right? Where state is relatively autonomous. In normal times, it is pro-poor. In capitalist time, in crisis time, it is pro-capitalist. Bangladesh. Bangladesh, when it was growing, gave a lot of amenities, a lot of social justice to its citizens, whereby you see in Asia, Bangladesh was second or third in Human Development Index. When when the when COVID crisis came, when crisis situation came economically in Bangladesh, what started happening was Sheikh Hasina started giving a lot of levies, a lot of freebies, a lot of what you say, a lot of policies which were pro-capitalist, like this, like that policy of reservation for freedom fighters, right? This is how state act. In normal times, it is pro-poor. That is, it in short term, it maintains relative autonomy, and in crisis time, it is pro-capitalist. That means in long term, it is an instrument. I gave you two examples, one of USA, others of Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh, right? So, so in normal times, state is neutral. State maintains its relative autonomy. In crisis time, it favors rich, right? This is what structural view structuralist view on state is trying to say. We have already studied in structuralist view Gramsci. We have studied historical block. We have studied types of state. We have studied all that, and that was Gramsci's theory of state. Now we are going to study Althusser, because we are trying to understand interpolation and instrument of interpolation, whereby we are trying to understand the first instrument of interpolation, which is state, right? For Althusser, state is more entrenched than we see, right? State is more entrenched that we see, and Althusser says that there is basic structure, there is superstructure, and in superstructure, again, basic structure will be invariably economy because he is a Marxist. But in superstructure, he suggests there are two types. First is ISA, second is RSA, right? How did Gramsci build this structure? Gramsci built this structure like this. This is basic structure economy. This is civil society, and this is state. This is political state, right? Althusser's structure is like this. Basic structure is economy. Then there is in ideological state apparatus, and there is repressive state apparatus. In ideological state apparatus, there is institutions like church and school. In repressive state apparatus, there are institutions like police and army, right? Of these institutions, For Althusser, school is the most important apparatus, or most important ideological state apparatus. Of these four apparatuses, to interpolate an individual, for him, school is most important. Because why? Because school in school it is very easy to infuse ideas, and in school children are children are easily impressionable, right? When easily impressionable children infused with new ideas, they grasp those ideas very easily, right? I will give you example of North Korean schools, right? North Korean schools, or closer to home, I will take example of Pakistan, right? Pakistani curriculum. In Pakistani curriculum, I have recently seen a screenshot whereby they have suggested that Operation Sindoor was won by Pakistan. Now, most of the international analysis, most of the war analysis, while accepting that India had lost one or two, India had sustained some damage to its aircrafts, but at the same time they say that the damage which India did to Pakistan was irreparable, in the sense that we struck deep inside Pakistan. Pakistan was not able to do the same thing, right? India was a clear winner, but Pakistani curriculum says that Operation Sindoor was won by Pakistan, right? Now this is written to, or this is said to the children of very impressionable age. When things like this are said to the children of very impressionable age, they tend to believe all such things, right? Then these children are interpolated to believe Pakistan is a stronger state than India, which is simply not true. And when they really understand what is might of India, they they lose that interpolation, right? That is why school is the most important ideological state apparatus. Interpolation, that you are limited to the ideas which have been fed to you. You are limited to the discourses, you are limited to the structures within which you are living, within which you are living, right? So this is what Althusser means, and this is what Althusser is trying to say. Okay, this was the first instrument of interpolation as explained by Althusser. Now we are going to see second instrument of interpolation, which is ideology. Which is ideology. Interpolation. How does ideology interpolate you? How does ideology interpolate you? Right? We have seen throughout the postmodernism that it is the ideas which limit you, right? It is the idea which limit you. It is the knowledge which limits you. It is the same idea which Althusser is taking ahead, whereby he says that man is born interpolated. Man is born interpolated, which means, this is a quote of him, which means that with the birth, with the birth, man is under man is under influence of ideas or ideology, right? right? With the birth, man is under influence of ideology and idea. Very similar to Foucault's idea of discourses, biopower, all his ideas, right? Very similar. That you are limited to ideas. You are limited to influence of ideas. You are not able to break that those things and those ideas. Very similar to that. Not really much difference is there, right? Man is born interpolated. You are born with the idea, and these idea limit your thinking, right? What Althusser does next is challenges and reforms Marx's view on ideology. What does Marx calls ideology? Marx calls ideology to be false consciousness. He says that workers should break the chains of ideology, religion, and unite. Right? He calls ideology to be false consciousness, and he suggests that a worker a worker who has been ideology who has false consciousness, who has been ideologized, or with is a religious person, a worker who is religious person, or a worker who follows a particular ideology, is having false consciousness. But Marx believes that this false consciousness can turn to true consciousness, right? This is what Marx believes. Why does Marx believes that? Because Marx takes a teleological view of history, whereby he thinks that class polarization will be so much, inequality will be so much, that worker will eventually revolution he will eventually do revolution, right? Worker will eventually become class in itself and class for itself, right? This will happen on its own. This is what Marx is trying to say. Worker can develop true consciousness. But what does Althusser say? Althusser says that man is interpolated. Man is limited by the structures and cannot develop true consciousness. Man is interpolated by the structures and cannot develop true consciousness because his whole thinking is within those structures, is within those structures, right? Then what does Marx say? Marx says marx says ideology is illusion. Ideology is something which is ideal, which does not have material existence. Ideology is something which is in the mind of people. For Althusser, ideology is illusion. What does illusion mean? Illusion means something which is having material existence, something which is real. What does this material existence or real means? Real in mind. What does this mean? Ideology reflects itself materially, materially through institutions like state, through institutions and buildings, right? Through institutions themselves. How? Right? In Congress rule, how do ideology reflects itself? This is what I'm trying to explain, and how ideology has material existence. In Congress rule, if we know, that Major Dhyanchand Award was named Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award, right? The pinnacle of sports award, Gandhi Khel Ratna Award, it was called as Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award in Congress rule. When BJP's rule came, the award name was changed to Major Dhyanchand Khel Ratna Award, right? You see, you see that ideology of BJP and ideology of Congress have separate material existence, right? Ideology reflects itself through material things. This is what illusion means. Something which is real in mind, something which has material existence, right? Then on ideology, what does Marx say? Marx says that ideology is ideational, right? And for Althusser, ideology is ideational and materialistic as well. Like, right? Very much like above point, right? Very much like above point. That ideology reflects itself through material things. That ideology is materialistic, right? To explain this point again, that ideology is materialistic, there is this one quote of Althusser whereby he says that ideology is lived experience. Ideology is lived experience. What does this mean? Ideology is lived experience. What does this mean? This means that this means that ideology, you live ideology. You live ideology everywhere, right? If I am this person A, right? Through school, through religion, through state, through even traveling, right? Through even living, through even walking. I will explain how. I walk, I see 10 posters of X party, Y party, Z party, right? Through religion, either if I oppose a religion or support a religion, I will live ideology. Through school, there are schools of Congress, there are schools of BJP, there are schools of RSS, there are government schools. All these schools also will shape me in some way or form. In family, people will have different ideological orientations, right? If I go, if I go, if I go to travel, right? In buses, in trains, you see posters again, right? So ideology is lived experience. Ideology is lived experience, whereby whereby you live, eat, and breathe ideology. It is a similar concept as Simone de Beau's women is a lived experience. Womanhood is a lived experience. Right? So ideology also interpolates man because it limits man through its ideas. Right? So this was ideology and as an instrument to interpolate man. I hope you understood Althusser in detail. Now, now we have finished all of postmodernism. From Lyotard to Althusser, we have finished all of them. There are one or two people which I feel are uh, are remaining. We are yet to do Derrida. Derrida is remaining, and post-colonialism is remaining. We will see in that in the next lecture. I hope you understood Althusser in great detail. I'll see you.